raised $75 million to grow Poe.
Training deceptive LLM models.
New York Times suing OpenAI.
All right, Happy New Year, Draw. We're back in action. 2024, This Week in AI. How was your break?
It was a great break.
Well, I've missed talking to you, so let's kick off this week. There's a lot going on. I think this is going to be a huge year, as we talked about. At the tail end of last year. This year, I think AI will come into its own. Is going to be the thing on top of already being the thing, but we're going to see progresses in that. So I'm really excited. Look, why don't we kick off with Bill Gates and Sam Altman? They had a bit of a chat on one of your mate Bill's podcasts, really talking about where Sam Altman sees OpenAI going. I thought it was quite interesting. Did you get a chance to see that?
No, tell me, what did they talk about?
Look, I think they talked about where I guess they see the progression this year in AI, and equally around where the future of GPT, where they see that progressing. And so they sort of, a lot of what we've talked about as well, which is good to hear, about, AI being really penetrating into society, but equally around how the labor market's going to change. I think one of the things they also talked about was the hardware and the software coming together, a little bit like, some of the things that Tesla have talked about, creating their robots. So I think that robotics and AI, we're going to see more of that as well. One of the things you talked about early on last year was around video, training with video, but equally the generation of video. And so I think this year we're going to see some really big advances in with that. What's your sort of thoughts around what where you see that discussion going?
Bill Gates has been talking for many years about the idea of natural language as an interface into computing. So I think that the LLMs were the technical innovation that was required in order to make voice command and conversation proper user interface into computers. So now it's easy to imagine lots of apps, how they will be reimagined when you can talk to them, not just click and drag and type. Calendar is the first one. Hey, what's coming up next? Can you change this, move this? That's the things that easy to understand. But there's a lot of other software out there that it really makes you wonder what's going to happen to them. If you just take all of the operating system, all the apps in the operating system of Microsoft, for example, and you think about, okay, I can talk to this now. Now it's not longer about clicking, dragging, typing. It's about also talking. You can start seeing how each one of those will evolve quite rapidly sometimes. Sounds like Bill Gates has a lot of ideas about where these things are heading. What I'm always curious about, where things that we expect will happen, but we'll be surprised. A lot of people are talking about robots and they imagine a humanoid robot walking around in their home. And I don't know, it's like maybe that would happen, but like most chances is that it won't happen. There would be something else. You mentioned that they talked about robots. Was there any take about like the form factor?
I think they're talking about exploring into that area. The logical thing, I think they're seeing the advances in those robotics with AI as well, I think is going to be that combination. And I think, once again, that's the thing. It's a combination of AI plus another advancement in technology or data or whatever it is where we're going to see this flourish. And I think that was another one of their points, was really around how we use this for good uses, and equally around that personalization being a big thing as well, which is what you're saying as well. So I don't know if there was another really interesting thing that the researchers from Anthropic came up with as well, which was really around training deceptive LLM models. So having these sort of sleeper models. I found that quite interesting because I think we're obviously looking at a lot of these things in the positive light, and I think we are both optimists around this. But I think one of the things that we discussed, with the US election, with all these other things happening with other elections around the use of AI for deceptive purposes. And so there was some research around this. There's a paper out there around, how do we poison LLMs, have these hidden backdoors, and make some undesirable behaviors within there. Well, what's your sort of take on that, and in terms of possible implications, or how we just deal with that as a scenario?
I think it's similar to how when you build any big piece of software, you've got a red team that tests the vulnerabilities of that software and how it can build viruses, or how to penetrate, or how you can exploit that for bad. And it's a part of, so if you've got this new technical capability called large language model, you want to have a really well understood way in which it can be exploited. And I think research that basically saying, let's try to break this is good research. I like what they've done. What they demonstrated is that after they poisoned the LLM, the standard safety training techniques like reinforcement learning and fine-tuning didn't actually work. Well, I think that's basically what it suggests to me. This will have impact into the way these things are trained and deployed. meaning that if there is a vulnerability in a large language model, you need to retrain it, or that means that the current way of doing it is just not sufficient. I think where this is heading is towards just ever improving, ways to the way these things work. Currently, the way they work is that you kind of train a model, it takes forever, it takes really expensive, then you deploy it and you let people kind of fine tune it, and it's like the layer above it. But the training is the thing that matters, and this is a hard coding in a way. This is just weights. There literally is a long list of numbers. That's actually what a model is at the end when you save it into a file. And then what these guys are saying, like, listen, we may have a problem because if we poison that process, we won't be like, it's not fixable just coming from the top layer in the fine tuning and the reinforcement learning thing. I guess that tells you that models needs to be trained and retrained and change, which is a different architecture in terms of just the pipeline of how these things are played and where the money is. So if this is true, this kind of is like the same way you deploy an operating system and you keep patching it. Do you know what I'm saying? I can see that they would be keep patching the models.
Well, I also see that there's potentially this antivirus or malicious code. How there'll be something that is there scanning and looking within particular models. I think commercially could be a big problem. If this is what that paper was saying, was it's triggered by particular things. So it's all good until something happens. And so it's kind of scary that it can pop up a year into people, could be very useful for some period of time. And then that sort of malicious thing comes into there. So anyway, look, I thought it was interesting. Yeah. What else, Draw?
I've seen that Quora raised $75 million from A16Z to grow Poe, which is the AI platform. I kind of downloaded Poe at the beginning. Basically, it was OpenAI for the mobile form factor before OpenAI came up with their own app. I just think it's interesting because Quora, when they started, their objective was to become a way to ask questions and get answers. Early on, they were envisioning a future in which you would ask the computer something and it will give you a response. And as opposed to Google, at the time, if you remember early on, you were kind of coming up with queries and were hoping that someone wrote an article about that. So they were trying to say, well, the natural way in which people are asking questions is actually like with natural language. So let's build a platform that basically is geared towards people asking questions and will be able to surface the answers. But they still required people to, in advance, answer all those questions. So it became much more of a social network thing as opposed to AI at the beginning. And then AI happens, and Quora is finding itself behind the curve because look where they are and where OpenAI is. But the CEO and the founder of Quora is actually on the board of OpenAI. So there's a lot of, it's very interesting that, Adam, his name is Adam D'Angelo, famous, founder, Silicon Valley personality, and he's also on the board of OpenAI, and now he's also building a competition on the top of OpenAI. Frankly, it sounds classic Silicon Valley. So I'm very curious where he's going with this. What's your take?
One of the interesting things is they obviously have this data set and of really interesting information, and it makes logical sense for you to be able to leverage that using AI and being able to question it and use it in a different way than what we've previously been able to. This is, once again, this is user-generated content. At some point, all of us are going to go, what is my data being used for? Why are companies able to use my content to then get money? And so there needs to be some way, I think, and I don't know who's going to solve that, but for people to be remunerated for their data and what they're putting in. And I think that would be an interesting thing down the line as well, where you go, I give authority for that to happen. And then there's some way to get some money back. And if that's used as part of the model for training, or if it's, I don't know, but there's a way I think that needs to be factored in because, that data is very valuable. And that's why they're able to raise that money. That's why they're kind of bringing this in to expand that out.
I don't know. I've got a different opinion on that one. I think that vision of monetizing content, micropayments for my contribution, I think it's fundamentally flawed. I think I don't see it's going to ever happen. I know a lot of people want it to happen. At the end of the day, after you train a model, really, what do you have? You have seriously a string of numbers. That's a file. That's what trained model looks like. It's just numbers. Okay, so when I have that number, after scanning the whole of the world, all the content out there, can you tell me where my article is in that? It's impossible. Now, I already have that I'm not talking about like, hey, what did New York Times write 2 years ago? Give me exactly what they wrote. That's not the kind of extraction that people use large language model for. Okay, that is copyrightable. What people are using large language model for is the knowledge and the intelligence that you get to query the intelligence that you get from knowing everything in a novel way. So it's not give me an article about food fiber in food, and then here's the article by this person, here's attribution, here's monetization. It's much more like a general question like, hey, what fruit has lots of fiber? Okay, now it's much more common knowledge as opposed to individual contribution. So it's a little bit like in society, we all talk to each other, and as a society we all get a little bit more intelligent by talking to each other and exchanging ideas. So imagine that some guy is super smart and he's talking to a lot of people, and then you can ask him lots of questions. And then you go like, wait a second, I talked to him a year ago and I gave him that idea, but actually he took that idea and he synthesizes it with this other idea, another book he read, and so forth. And he gives this answer to this other person about that was asked something. So now what are you going to do? You're going to contribute what you through blockchain, 6 cents to each, 5 cents, a cent, half a cent to all the people that you could that learned from this guy? I just don't think the paradigm is the right paradigm. People are thinking about monetization of content, about click views, and like, here's my video or here's my article, you sell an ad next to it, so give me some money because you sold an ad next to my content. And that makes sense. That's the old internet. To think about monetization in the concept of an intelligence, I just don't understand this. I don't understand where they're going with it and how it's going to work. So that's why I'm very skeptical about it.
Yeah, no, I think this is a general principle that I think is the way someone like Quora are able to do that is through all of the content of the users. I agree with you. It's different to searching and being something specific, but there are definite references to when an LLM is using some of your data in there, will be quoted back. It might be worded differently, it might be whatever it is. I think if you can go that referenceability of how some of the models are generating information, there will be references back to something that people will have written, and they probably deserve to be either referenced at a minimum, and whether that compensation or that's my only thing. I think it'll be interesting how this plays out at some point. I think people will start to go, I don't want to put my data into that. I don't want it to be that without getting that. And maybe someone will come up with a solution that will account for that. And I agree with you, it's different. And whether it is possible or it is
open question. Great area for research and investments.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. Yeah, that's what I mean. I agree with you. It might not even be possible. It's the same thing as regulation, how that could or couldn't happen. They're all interesting things that we'll see play out. So excellent.
This actually relates also to New York Times suing OpenAI. They say that OpenAI regurgitates the content of New York Times, and that's basically a infringement of their copyright. I think that lawsuit has merit. Maybe they're going to have to compensate for a few. I don't think the damages happened or so much, right? I don't think people go to OpenAI to ChatGPT and say, what did Thomas Friedman write last week? And then here's the article without adequate referencing or compensation. It's a really interesting philosophical legal question. Can AI be trained on someone's else content? And I think the answer is yes, because I'm reading all this content. I'm training my brain on that. And I'm using that brain, to make money. I'm talking to people and I'm an expert. But I just think that the fact that maybe they say that, the LLM regurgitated some content, I think that's a bug in the way the interface works or the actual LLM work. I don't think that tells us where things are heading, if I'm honest.
Well, I think this is a fundamental thing that's going to happen. It's just got to be resolved at some point. I think the law is always, many years, and in this case, it's challenging the law on all fronts. It's also about art and creation. Art, logically, as humans, we learn off other and create new forms of creativity off the back of it. And we talk about music, and you look at how people sample things or people are influenced. You're seeing the AI generated music is some of it's pretty good. Those artists, it is based off artists, their own IP. There needs to be some way of this being attributed, and whether it can or can't. So let's see how this plays out. But it's definitely interesting. I think one of our things for this year, Draw, is to be short and sweet. So let's make sure we keep our This Week in AI short and sweet. A little bit like me. That was a bad joke. That was a dad joke. That was a really bad dad joke.
It's okay. It's like maybe 2024 will be about doing good jokes. I agree. It was a good show, and it was a big week, and I think it's going to be a big year.
Let's catch up next week. I'm looking forward to it. And good to have you back. That's This Week in AI. Bye.
See you later.